Everybody wants to be oppressed now. So why is it that when we talk about racial injustice or discrimination, only one race comes to mind? The black community or black people in general. Don't you just wonder why slavery, discrimination, racial injustice or colonialism only applies to black people? And this makes us wonder why other races don't get in the mix. It's like there are a lot of MJs out there, Michael Jordan, MJ this, MJ that. But when you search MJ on YouTube, the algorithm only brings you content about Michael Jackson. It's like he's the only MJ in the world. And this might not be the perfect example, but you get what I'm saying. Of course, you're gonna find other MJs as you scroll through Michael Jackson's videos, but his MJ is the one that is ranking first. And that means that as much as other MJs are in existence, you're just gonna have a hard time trying to find them. Which brings me to today's discussion. An Asian woman asks, why is it that when it comes to slavery or racial injustice, only black people are concerned? And this got a lot of people trying to share their perspectives and insights, trying to educate this Asian woman as to why this is. And we're going to talk about that in a moment as I play you this video and the reactions that it sparked.
Hi, hello. This is going to be shocking for many of you to hear, but did you know that black people are not the only race to have historically experienced slavery? I know this is shocking, but pretty much every civilization in the history of mankind, at some point, their ancestry owned slaves. Because slavery was a worldwide human rights issue for a very, very long time, for many centuries. So it doesn't matter if you're white, black, Asian, Hispanic, whatever. Very likely at some point, your ancestry down the line owned slaves. Doesn't make it right, but that was just the way of the world for a very, very long time. So all these comments like, you're not black, you can't speak about slavery. It doesn't matter what color your skin is. Slavery was a human rights issue across the world, across all races and all civilizations for a long time. And the United States was one of the first countries to abolish it very quickly and efficiently. So all the comments about being a non-black person, you can't speak about slavery, every single civilization has experienced slavery at some point. Black people are not the only race to have historically experienced slavery.
It is so bizarre to me how the Asian American community does this.
Oh, before any of you guys come at me, I'm just as Asian as she is.
I have seen this with non-black people of color, specifically in the Asian community, where they equate their experience with the black experience when they're just not even comparable. To say that you can speak on slavery because it has happened everywhere, even though you are living in the United States. When the anatomy of government, the Constitution, was all synthesized during an era when the economy depended upon slavery, specifically of black people, language like this is just so unbelievably harmful. I'm not saying that we didn't struggle, but to play this weird game of oppression Olympics when we immigrated more recently, where the building blocks of this country did not incorporate us or take us into consideration and were essentially built upon the downfall of one specific community, you're weird for that. You're weird for that.
Black people are not the only race to have historically experienced slavery.
So now everybody wants to be oppressed now? Really? There is no comparison to the transatlantic slavery that happened to Africans. Stop that. African folks lost their land, their language, their spirituality, their families, their name. And when they got to the States, they were told they were what, 3/5 human? This same group of people didn't even get a chance to vote in this country until what, 1960 something? There's no damn comparison. Stop that. Let's not forget about Jim Crow and segregation that's affected these group of people still to this day. Still to this day, family. I'm tired of that. I was oppressed too. Bull.
Drawing insights from the conclusion that I gave you in the introduction about why Michael Jackson's MJ is the one that ranks first on YouTube is because of the impact that Michael Jackson had on the world. The same thing applies with slavery and the injustice to do with black community. It is the impact that this has had on history. People were marginalized and oppressed, and on top of that, this injustice for most palm-coloreds and other dominant races out there is something that they choose to ignore and refuse to accept as if it never happened. And this adds a layer of complexity, but also it's like a painful pierce through the flesh of black communities and marginalized communities all over the world. And also not to forget that Asians, because of their palm-coloredness, this places them on top of the food chain on the basis of racial dominance. Remember the time when some videos were circulating about blacks in Asia being marginalized or facing racial injustice because of their color? Some were even recorded being chased out of stores that were owned by Asian palm-coloreds. And this was around 2021 or during that period of the lockdown. And I remember some people that I know that were telling me about how their friends have gone abroad to Asia to school or university, and they are facing this marginalization. And I remember them drawing parallels to how the West and Asia are just all the same, because they look at us the same as palm-coloreds do. Now, let me just read you an article of what they wrote about this back in 2021. Scenes of Africans sleeping on the street with their belongings were shared widely on social media, which sparked outrage among African communities around the world and prompted rare public rebuke from some African governments. But the government of the Asian people denied that the authorities' conduct was discriminatory and blamed Western media for provoking the problems between this Asian country and African countries. And this came as a shock to a lot of African countries, because at the time, a lot of African governments were in partnership with this Asian government. And brothers and sisters alike took to social media to ask if you've ever seen black people colonize or enslave another race. This is just never the case. And this question is a great example of why black people can never be racially biased towards palm-coloreds, because this form of discrimination is based on the basis of race or palm-coloredness, right? And black people can do other things to palm-coloreds in their own countries, such as African blacks that are taking to social media to address these concerning issues. But it is just impossible for us to be racially biased towards them, because they are the originator of this phenomenon of destruction. With that being said, we're not being ignorant of the fact that Chinese people also faced segregation when they traveled in the Americas. But the difference between Chinese and black people is that Chinese people traveled to the Americas on their own basis and on their own terms, and they did so without anyone oppressing them or forcing them on ships to do so. Black people, on the other hand, were enslaved, and they were taken there, forced to leave their families and forced to leave their culture in order for them to work in fields for the palm color masters. And when we compare or relate this to the Chinese or the Asians that did so on purpose in search of labor, we're able to see the difference. And even when the Jim Crow laws were taking place, Chinese people were present in that land, but they were not being segregated as black people were. And these Jim Crow laws were put in place to further marginalize or to stop black people from getting into leadership positions, perhaps because the white man still felt like these people did not deserve the privilege of being granted freedom after enslavement. And even though Chinese were also marginalized, they were given an opportunity to embrace raciality or embrace racial injustice. And if they portrayed racial bias towards blacks, some palm-coloreds were willing to offer them jobs better than blacks. In fact, both people would have jobs, but blacks would work for lesser or for nothing when they were working as compared to the Chinese, that even though they earned little, they had more than what the black people had. And even though they were also marginalized, the black man's spirit was destroyed. The black man was put in the corner of the darkness because of this enslavement. Because you have to remember that this marginalization and this separation from the black or African culture still reverberated through these people that were left during that time. And they felt the loneliness and they felt the trauma that their people, the previous slaves, had left with them, as they told them stories of how the palm-coloreds came to their lands in Africa and separated them from their culture, from their families. Okay, you think about it. Is the word slave a good name? We're not trying to say that only black people were marginalized, but imagine these two scenarios. A Chinese man walks back to his home, finds his wife in the kitchen, and tells her that, oh, today was a bad day because I didn't find a job today. Alright. On the other hand, a black dad didn't even have a home to go back to in the first place. Are you seeing the scenarios here? A black man didn't have the freedom to go out there in search of a job. And even if he did, the only jobs that he would find are the lesser paying jobs, or jobs that were not even paying them at all. They might put a roof under their heads, but they had to fend for themselves in other areas. And that is it for our breakdown today. Tell me what you think in the comment section concerning this discussion, and if you have any contributions to make concerning the topics that we might have missed out, please feel free to do so and leave your thoughts in the comment section, and we'll be sure to read them. Now, if you found today's discussion insightful, interesting, or educative, please like, subscribe, and share with your family and friends to keep them aware of this engaging content that we have. Thank you for visiting. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.